Welcome to the May edition of The Compliance Life. This month I visit with Mark Beyer. Mark is the Chief Compliance Officer at the Pinellas Electrical Cooperative in the Hill Country of Texas. It is the largest electrical distribution cooperative in the United States. Mark has a very non-traditional background and journey to the CCO chair. He also has developed a compliance toolkit that he's learned in his various jobs leading up to his role as the CCO. I know you'll enjoy this month. In part 3, Mark moves to the medical device arena and works under Hugh Bigwood.
The Compliance Life details the journey to and in the role of a Chief Compliance Officer. How does one come to sit in the CCO chair? What are some of the skills a CCO needs to successfully navigate the compliance waters in any company? What are some of the top challenges CCOs have faced, and how did they meet them? These questions and many others will be explored in this new podcast series. The Compliance Life is hosted by Tom Fox, and each month he'll present the story of one CCO through 4 episodes. The Compliance Life is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
We're going to have a quick word from our sponsor, and then we'll be right back with Mark Beyer on The Compliance Life. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for episode 3 in our May series of The Compliance Life. I once again have back with me Mark Beyer. Mark, first of all, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Mark, as we ended episode 2, you detailed your work at Baker Hughes, an oilfield service company, and you also told us that you were really interested in working with a company that you felt had a mission and about and clear evidence of doing good. So I was wondering if you could tell us where you went after Baker Hughes.
Wanting to move back towards a more mission-focused company approach, I guess. I found or came across the opportunity to join a company called LivaNova. It's a medical device company headquartered out of the UK, but their US headquarters was based outside of Houston. So convenient for me, smaller company than I was used to coming out of Lockheed at the time, over 100,000 employees. Baker, I want to say, had 60,000 or so employees at the time. LivaNova, when I was there, at least, they had, less than 4,000, I want to say, employees globally. But smaller organization, and I really learned the importance of having to wear more hats, so to speak, right? Having to do more with less. I came on as the head of ethics and compliance for North America, and so that was for LivaNova. It was Canada and US primarily. I went there, like I said, to feel good about the company's mission. What can be better than saving people's lives, and that's really what LivaNova did. They made heart valves, they made heart-lung machines. They also were in the neuromodulation space with epilepsy, with a neuromodulation device that helped with epilepsy patients or certain epilepsy patients. And so really wanted to feel connected to patients, connected to the patient experience and the benefit that those products had on patients. Quickly learned that the industry was a lot different than you kind of expect from looking from the outside. The role of sales in in a medical device organization, the role of clinical research, the importance they play on influencing the decisions of the organization and then the strategy of an organization, the importance of each sale. Ultimately to the end of the quarter and the financial health of the organization, and the importance of clinical strategy and clinical success to the finances of the organization, all that stuff, and kind of getting involved in that and seeing that from a compliance perspective was very interesting, and it took a little bit of a learning curve, but quickly got there. Also very unique industry in terms of compliance because of the sunshine laws that exist in the medical device and pharma side as well. Having to navigate through that, basically when the government imposes transparency requirements on where money is spent, things like grant money, even down to the lunches and dinners that sales reps have with customers, having to track all that information, report all that information, use that information to benefit your compliance program. All that was new and something that I learned real quickly.
You could talk about some of the really oversight aspects for North America, but I was actually more intrigued by your just last phrase, use that information, because that's a part of continuous monitoring. So, which the DOJ has more formally staked out in the last few years. But when you talk about using information to help improve or at least assess your compliance program, could you elaborate maybe with an example or two?
Really a good place to be at, where essentially the government requires all this data tracking and data management in terms of where finances are spent, where money is spent, who it's being spent on, all that stuff. It's a shame not to use that data in a proactive way, and so many organizations in the med area, med device area, and pharma area, that they're accustomed to using that information just for that purpose with compliance monitoring, auditing, which is kind of a look back, but also just monitoring and regulating the process in almost real time in a sense. And so getting there is always the challenge, and that was one thing that one direct area that we were working towards, was to better utilize our Sunshine data that we were having to acquire and having to report, but finding the unique and value, finding value in that data to the organization in other ways, was one of the tasks that I had at the time.
Mark, as our audience is now aware, at every place you've worked, you've expanded your compliance toolkit. So I was wondering if you had that opportunity at LivaNova, and if so, how did you expand your compliance toolkit, and what did you learn?
Yeah, so at Baker Hughes, I kind of started to expand a little bit beyond trade compliance, but I didn't go too far. LivaNova, I really went the other direction, went went all the way, right? Trade compliance wasn't generally a high risk for LivaNova because generally speaking, the devices that were manufactured in country were sold in country. So there wasn't a lot of cross-border activity being done. There were in certain pockets in certain risky areas, but generally speaking, trade compliance wasn't the primary role that I had. It was more on the ethics side, and more on the medical device regulatory compliance side. And so I really had to kind of learn the holistic, bigger picture role of ethics and compliance in an organization beyond just the kind of pocket of trade compliance. Also, that's really where my first opportunity to work closely with the C-Suite. Lucky enough to have a CEO that was accessible. Lucky to have general counsel that trusted us and allowed us to allowed me to participate and have a role in some cases and communicate into the C-suite where needed. Lucky enough to have a leader that was trusting as well. So a lot of great experiences. I had a mentor from LivaNova, Hugh Bigwood. He was located in the UK, and he was. I learned a tremendous amount from him. He was our compliance head of compliance, our chief compliance officer at the time at LivaNova, and he introduced me to a new side of of the compliance world. I think he thought about things in a very creative, very different way. I learned creativity in compliance there, I would say. Very behavioral science, values-oriented kind of approaches to things. He looked at compliance similar to sales or marketing in a sense, where non-traditional or approaches, trying to apply untraditional approaches to compliance, like for instance, looking at how teachers teach kids, and so that we can kind of use strategies like that to maybe apply to adult learning, looking at how marketing uses nudges and other behavioral science tactics to try to change employee behavior in certain areas or prevent employees from making bad decisions, more importantly. Design thinking, typically from an engineering perspective, maybe from a safety perspective, but looking at it as from how it can benefit compliance, focusing on what works, to change behavior rather than, kind of being the police of the company, which kind of oftentimes compliance, I've found, kind of finds itself into sometimes where employees think of you as the police and you're out to get us. Hugh really taught us how to kind of partner with the business from a creative way and take a more behavioral science change approach to it.
I'm glad you brought up Hugh. Hugh Bigwood is probably one of the top 5 compliance professionals I've ever met. I have interviewed him a couple of times, and the breadth and scope of his knowledge was just stunning to me. And the other thing that stunned me was really he seemed to be open to mentorship the world, and he loved sharing about the concepts you've talked about. He's really one of the most under the radar resources I have ever met in compliance. He's incredibly dynamic. And like I said, I've had the chance to interview him a couple of times, and I've always walked away IQ points smarter than when I started. So with that kind of my view on Hugh, what was he like to work with or work for? You've talked about him in terms of a mentor, but what was it like in terms of him or he being your manager?
Relaxing, I would say, would be one word, only because of the way he managed a team. You've always felt comfortable getting creative and trying new things, and not being judged potentially for the ideas that came out, because nothing was too crazy for Hugh. I mean, if anyone knows him, he's always looking for the most creative ways to solve problems. And he comes up with a lot of it, but he also finds ways to pull it out of his team as well. And so, and it's amazing how much time he puts into you as an individual, to helping guide you down the right path. And he knew early on my personality and my style. I'm a very rules-based person, very kind of structured, black and white, approach to life kind of person. And he knew that, and he taught me one of the bigger lessons I've ever learned, which is having to adjust who I am or how I kind of see people and see how other people work, so that I don't look at it through my lens, so that I can look at it through theirs, right? So I have to kind of force myself to not approach things in my way, but instead try to meet people where they are. And Hugh taught me that. Hugh taught me the importance of that, and he's has been a big part of my career so far.
The other concept you mentioned, which frankly not many people in compliance talk about, is design thinking. And I've written on design thinking, I've podcasted on design thinking, I've done design thinking, and I think design thinking is a great format or structure to think through not only your compliance program, but improving your compliance program. So I was wondering if you could give a few thoughts on your perspective of how the compliance professional can use any or all of the steps in design thinking to help improve their overall compliance program.
I mean, compliance, where you can fit it in from a process perspective and think about how the process fits in to the business, and how people apply those steps in reality, you're better off than you would be just saying do this because I said so, right? So if you're kind of building it in line, you're going to get a lot better results, and what we're trying to accomplish, which is hopefully preventing bad behavior rather than waiting for it to happen and just just catching it and disciplining people after the fact, right? So if the process is thought through, designed well, built well, communicated well, and efficient, where you have the right value-added steps in the right places, and you show people that are performing these steps that you thought through this and that we thought through this as a team, you're going to get a lot better buy-in. You're going to get a lot better compliance, a lot more success in terms of people following down the path you're wanting them to follow. So it's just one tool in the process. It doesn't apply in every situation, of course, because a lot of areas of compliance, as we all know, is really case by case. So process kind of is challenging to implement from a repeating standpoint. But where you can, I've always found it successful, and it's something that I've always tried to apply in procedural thinking.
Mark, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but I hope our listeners will join us for our fourth and final episode, where you move into the CCO chair in one of the more unique jobs in compliance that we'll get into. But before we leave, I was wondering if our listeners wanted any more information on yourself or any of the topics you've touched on. What would be the best way for them to find out?
Yeah, you can go to my LinkedIn profile, or you can just email me, mark.beyer@peci.com.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. Thank you again for listening to this episode of The Compliance Life. I hope you'll join me again next week, where I take up another episode in The Compliance Life. The Compliance Life is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network. If you would like to be featured on The Compliance Life, please give me an email at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. Also, if you like this series, please give us a rating on iTunes. Any review and rating would definitely help get the word out about the latest addition to the Compliance Podcast Network. Thanks again.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.